Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this second session of the Open Research Seminar organized by the group RENEW18. I'm Marco Storni, I'm a postdoc in the group. And today, for the second session, I have the pleasure of introducing BRENO ARSIOLI MOURA. BRENO is Associate Professor of History of Science and Physics teaching at the Federal University of ABC in Brazil. His research explores the iconography of science currently, with a focus on electricity and on optics. He's also interested in Newtonian optics, as we will see today, translation studies, and in the educational uses of historical content in science education, especially in teacher training. And currently, he's a senior visiting scholar at Europa Universität Flensburg in Germany, from where is talking to us today as a Humboldt Foundation Fellow, where he conducts research on the history of illustrations of electricity in the 18th century. So today, as it's customary in this seminar, he will have the opportunity to present one of his papers, a paper entitled The First French Translation of Book 2 of Newton's Optics, Omissions, Abridgements, and the Quest for Authorship. And after his presentation, we will open the floor for discussion. Thank you again for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Marco, and thank you everyone for being here. It's a great pleasure to be in this group and to discuss this paper that I really enjoyed writing at that time. It was like 5 years ago. So the idea, I guess everybody sees my presentation, right? So the idea of this short, very brief presentation is to give you some context of how why and how I wrote this paper and what I was doing at that time, and then I'll be really happy to hear from you, your impressions, doubts, and criticism, of course, and ideas. So okay, so this is the paper that you saw. I guess you see the okay. So it was published in Notes and Records of the Royal Society, first in 2020, and then it was published in the printed version in 2022. And as I said, I was very happy to this is one of my favorite papers that I wrote, and because it discusses like many things that I really like, as Marco has said, about my research interests. So it's about Newtonian optics, is about the French community, is about translation studies. So yeah, it's a very it's a paper that I really enjoyed. And I really enjoyed like the process of writing this paper. So to give you a little context, so since I was an undergrad student some years ago, I've been studying Newton's optics, especially book 2 of optics, or the second book of optics, as you see here. And this is a book that always caught my attention. I had like my advisor at the time. She had studied book 1 of optics, and so she suggested me to study book 2. And then I started to study book 2, and book 2 is really like a very interesting book of Newton's optics. I guess you may know, not optics is split into 3 different books. So book 1 is very like experimental in a way. So it has like the Newton's experiments with prisms, the telescope, the heterogeneity of light, etc. And book 3, which is the last book, is somehow a very hypothetical book. So it has like the discussions of diffraction and the questions. And somehow book 2 lies between these books, not only geographically, but epistemologically. So it's not a book that is so like empirical as the first one. It has observations, propositions, etc. It has one definition, that is the definition of the fits, the theory of fits, but it is also covered in many hypothetical thoughts, not explicit hypothetical thoughts, but maybe implicit hypothetical thoughts. It's a book that discusses the colors of bodies. It discusses the colored rings in thin and thick films, which we know today as Newton's rings. And it also presents the one of the most, for me, one of the most interesting, complex theories that Newton developed in his optics, that was which was the theory of fits, of easy reflection and easy transmission. So yes, I really wanted to study this book. When I did my master's some years later, I studied the reception of this book within England, especially England. And then I became a professor, and I started to expand my research interests. And I really wanted to study the reception of this book in other parts of Europe, especially France and Portugal. France because, well, it's France, like it has really a relevance when you mention the introduction of Newtonian ideas in Europe, in the continent, and especially because when I started to study that, what I could read, I could see many books and papers on Newton's ideas in France, but most of them discussed the mechanics or book one, like the experiments with prisms, etc. And few studies discussed the reception of book two, so the theory of fits, the color of bodies, and so on. So I really had this research interest, and Portugal because I am I speak Portuguese. Portuguese is my mother language, and there is still today, I can say that there is almost nothing about the introduction of Newtonian ideas in Portugal. And there are some studies, people in Lisbon, for instance, that studies a lot Newtonianism in Portugal, but again, always the mechanics, not optics. So I really wanted to understand optics in Portugal. So throughout these studies, this is like 2014 and 15, I got to know this book chapter that was written by Bernard Cohen, Isaac Newton, Hans Sloane, and the Académie Royale des Sciences. It was published within this book, L'Aventure de la Science, that Cohen and René Taton edited. Cohen, for me, is one of the greatest historians of science, and I really like his works. And in this paper, he, of course, he mentioned Hans Sloane, which became president of the Royal Society after Newton, and the relationship between Sloane and a French savant called Etienne François Geoffroy. He was a chemist, a young chemist at the Académie des Sciences, and they had like a good relationship. And Hans Sloane gave to Geoffroy, this is the beginning of 18th century, he gave Geoffroy a copy of the first edition of the Opticks that was published in 1704. And then in one of the sessions of the sections of this book chapter, Cohen discussed what was supposedly the first French translation of Newton's Opticks in France. So he mentions that Geoffroy presented a French translation to his peers at the Académie des Sciences in 1706 and 1707, and that he really that he was trying to find this manuscript, this early translation, and then that he found this translation in one of the libraries of the French National Library System. So he discussed these translations. This was not the first time that I have read something about this early translation of Geoffroy. I've had read before, for instance, Henry Gerlach, Newton on the Continent. I guess you all know this book, very interesting book. And he mentions Geoffroy translation in this book. And for instance, Rupert Hall, All Was Light, also mentions this translation. But it was in this book chapter from Bernard Cohen, by Bernard Cohen, that I read the first detailed analysis of this manuscript. And I really was fascinated because Cohen, he somehow compared in a way that I did in my paper at Notes in Notes and Records, but he compared like the translation of this in this manuscript and with one of the first editions of the Opticks, and he mentions that he believes that this manuscript is in fact the manuscript that was written by Geoffroy for a number of reasons. For instance, the omissions and the abridgements. This is not a literal translation. This is a very condensed translation. And then Cohen mentioned that it was suitable to be read to the members of the Academy. It has some discussions on chemical topics. So the translator chose to translate some parts of the Opticks that discuss the chemical topics. It has like the length is adequate to be presented to someone else, the handwriting and so on. So he gives some reasons that why he believes that this is a Geoffroy manuscript. But Cohen, he focuses, he gives emphasis in the translation of book 1. So I really wanted to see how book 2 was translated in this manuscript, because Cohen mentions, like he mentions one part or one single extract from book 2, and I really wanted to understand how book 2 was translated in this manuscript. So in 2020, I had the opportunity to go to Paris. I was visiting scholar at the Laboratoire Sphère under the collaboration with Professor Olivier Darrigol. This was the title of my project at the time, The Newtonianisms in France and in Portugal in the 18th Century, reassessment from the perspective of books 2 and 3 of Opticks. It was funded by Brazilian research agents, FAPESP, São Paulo Research Foundation. Then I went there. I had the opportunity to access the archives. I didn't go to France just to see this manuscript. It was a bigger project. I went to Portugal as well. I spent some days, some weeks in Portugal, doing some archival work at the Lisbon Academy of Science, and it was really a great opportunity. Well, I was supposed to stay in France from January to May, but everybody knows what happened in 2020, so I didn't have the opportunity to finish this project. I had to finish with what I had at the time. So in March, I came back to Brazil after in the middle of all the chaos that you are very aware of. But I had the time, I had the opportunity to go to this library. It's Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal in Paris. Is a very tiny library compared to other sites of the French National Library. For instance, in Tolbiac, Tolbiac site is a big, enormous complex. But this is like a tiny library, and the manuscript is there. That's where Bernard Cohen found the manuscript, and it's still, I guess, still today, it's still there. So I went there, I had the opportunity to go there, and I had access to this manuscript. So this is the manuscript. I did not have access to the actual manuscript. I saw the microfilm of this manuscript, but I had the opportunity to digitize the entire manuscript, so I have it with me. I before everything closed. So I went there, I digitized everything, then I went back to Brazil, then I had the opportunity to analyze it with well, more calmly, if we can say that, in the middle of all that chaos that happened in 2020. So basically what we have about this manuscript, this image that you're seeing below is a print from a print screen from the catalog of Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal, where there is, this is a catalog from 1887, so it's late 19th century, and basically this is the only information that we have about this manuscript. We have nothing regard its authorship. We don't even know if this manuscript was in fact produced in the 18th century. We only know this, that we have like this entry in late 19th century. We don't know how this manuscript ended up in Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal. I asked the librarians at the time. They had no information about this manuscript, so it's a mystery. But yes, what we know is that it is a translation of the possibly of the first edition of the Opticks, because of the year that you're seeing there, 1704. And we have like some Cohen and not we, but Cohen had some thought that this could be like an 18th century manuscript, because again, it was probably based on the first edition of the Opticks, and it doesn't have any translation of book 3, because at that time the important questions were not published yet. For instance, question number 31, very lengthy and controversial and interesting question. It was published before. It was inserted by Newton in later editions. So yes, we have some evidence, but in fact, we don't have many evidence. We don't have like almost nothing about this manuscript. But as Cohen, I believe this manuscript was written by Geoffroy. I'm not going to discuss the details. You've already read the paper, but I want to call the attention of one part of this manuscript, which is, well, so you can see the way it's written. It's a very elegant handwriting. The French is very. There are some words that are different from today, but yes, we can read. It is not just hand notes. So this is important, because it seems to be really produced by to be read by someone else. So it is not like, for instance, if you compare with Newton's notebooks, the terrible handwriting that we find there, this is nothing compared with this handwriting. Very elegant, very fine. So I wanna emphasize this part, because this is the part where Newton wrote his definition on fits. So his theory of fits. He said, returns of the disposition of any ray to be reflected, I will call it fits of easy reflection, and blah blah blah. And when we look at the translation, we see that the translator translated fits to accès. And there is Alan Shapiro, who is a great historian of Newton's optics. He mentions that this the odd choice for this term, for this theory, like this odd word fits, which has a medical origin, a medical connotation. It's like it's related to some transient state, um, maybe related to a disease called malaria. So a person has fever, and then it comes and goes. So it is really transient state. And Newton was the first to use this term into like physical uh, context. And the translator was very able to capture this sense because he used a word that also in this language has a medical origin. It is very difficult because to translate fits to a language that has some Latin origin, and the translator had really he was really able to capture this medical sense of the word accès. Accès is the same, for instance, in Italian, accesso, or in Portuguese, acesso. It's also it has also the same meaning in these three. It has also other meanings, more common meanings, but it has this medical origin as well. So I believe that this shows that this translator was a person that really understood English and really could understand, like really could capture this sense and transport it to the French language. And you can see that if this is really an 18th century manuscript, early 18th century manuscript, if this is really Geoffroy's translation, this could possibly have influenced other French translators that also worked on Newton's optics. For instance, Pierre Coste, which is maybe the standard French translation. He also translated fit to accès, and Jean-Paul Marat at the end of the 18th century also presented another translation of Newton's optics, and he also translated fit to accès. Well, Coste and Marat could as well have captured this medical sense and showed and chose this word as this early translator, or this early translation could have influenced these later translations of the optics. This is one of the things that I mentioned at the very end of the paper. That is a very hypothetical thought of how this early translation may have circulated, but I think that this shows that yeah, in fact, this translator was really able to capture the sense of this odd word that Newton had chosen for his theory. And well, just to finish, of course, that many of these arguments I know, and I really think that Cohen knew also, are circumstantial because these are hypothetical ideas. We're trying to connect the dots to give it a picture. But in fact, I do not believe that we could think that, for instance, this translation was produced later. For instance, someone read Pierre Coste's translation, and then, okay, I'm going to do my own translation. Yes, we can think about that, but I don't see any reason why a person would do that. And I don't see any reason why would that manuscript ended up at the Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal. I think that there was some kind of movement with this manuscript that can explain why this manuscript exists, why it is at the Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal. So I really believe that this manuscript was produced by Geoffroy. Yes, so that's it. Thank you. really, I really wanted to hear from you. What do you think about it?
Thank you very much for this nice presentation. I suggest we open the floor for discussion, and I might just start and break the ice with the first very general question. So, while reading your paper and now listening to you, I had something on my mind. So, in this project, we are collectively investigating the responses to Newton. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
areas which interests us is precisely France, 18th century France. So one aspect that you don't really address in the paper, but I'd be curious to know about is how do you interpret this translation supposedly by Geoffroy
Mm-hmm.
in the panorama, in the landscape of the reception of the responses to Newton in 18th century France, and especially vis-a-vis the narratives that exist,
Mm-hmm.
Gerlach's, J.B. Shanks, or other
Mm-hmm.
narratives, whether this new piece of evidence, this new translation, adds anything to the narrative of the
Mm-hmm.
responses to Newton, or whether it's just it is a confirmation of a certain narrative, or
Um, well, I think I wrote something about it, about JB Shunk comments on this in the paper. But yeah, I don't know if we can place this translation in any, because there is a narrative that this could show like Geoffroy's um, presentation of the concept of attraction and so on. But I really don't believe in this, because I could not see anything in the manuscript that could lead to any kind of interpretation that he was like trying to to introduce any of Newton's ideas within the members of the Academy. What I think from the manuscript is, I think that, well, first of all, this, I believe, again, this is Geoffroy's translation. I believe that he had a great relationship with Hans Lowen. Hans Lowen gave him uh, um, the, uh, the the newest book of this great British natural, or English natural philosopher at that time, who had just became president of the Royal Society, had just been elected associé étranger of the French Academy of Sciences. And so I think that Geoffroy got this opportunity to present this new work from this associate étranger. And then that he chose chose to omit some of the parts of the book, because maybe he thought these parts were too controversial because of the previous history that Newton had with French with the French community, if you can say that. For instance, Mariotte and so on. And then I think that he chose to present like a condensed version. And I really remember of looking at the procès-verbaux of the Academy, the minutes of the meetings. Like I've read like many minutes from 1706 and 17. I just having some problems with my camera, I think, because I cannot. Okay, one moment. What? I don't know why he's not activating my camera.
I mean, as long as we here is better not to lose you.
Yeah.
So
No,
if
so while I'm working on it, just to finish what I was saying, I really remember like going through all the minutes of the Académie des Sciences, and I didn't find any reaction to this translation. So I couldn't find anything that it provoked something among the members of the academy. So yeah, again, I really don't think that we can place like in any specific narrative. I think that this is more like he took the opportunity to present like the newest book of this of the newest associé étranger, and that's it. But yeah, this is my impression. So
Yes, so I might just go with a follow-up until somebody else wants to ask another question. So my follow-up is there is also a question from Karim. Just briefly, my follow-up is the following. I've always thought that people like Gerlach or students of Gerlach and so on used the case of the reception of the optics. That's why I asked my question. Used this case of the reception of the optics, particularly the first book, as evidence or as suggesting the fact that the very early reception of Newton in France was, if not uncontroversial, in any case less controversial than the later reception when it came to discussing the system of the world, the cosmologies. So, and it seemed to me that your the manuscript you found seems to, if not contradict, go in a different direction. Namely, that even in the reading of the optics, in the early reception of Newton, there were cuts, there were controversial points that the French perceived as problematic. So that's why I was interested in the
uh,
in this issue. But
I think that he understood that there was some controversy, and that's why he chose to omit some of the commentaries, some of Newton's ideas in his translation. But yeah, but again, this is my impression from this translation, again, because I don't see any reaction from the French community. You don't see any commentary on that. For instance, Gerlach mentions that Malebranche was probably converted to Newtonianism or Newtonian optics. But again, I looked at Malebranche's work, the many versions that this work had, and I couldn't find like any mention to Geoffroy, to this translation.
yeah, thank you very much. So we can move on to Karin's question, please.
Yes. Okay, thanks for sharing your paper with us and for the introduction. I thought it was interesting, although it's not at all my area of research. I think there are maybe two strands in the paper, at least. One concerns the choices that were made by the author to make the material or to pick the most relevant elements of Newton's chapter to present it to his audience. And the other one is the question, well, what was the identity of the author? And to be honest, I was not very satisfied with the circumstantial evidence. First of all, I think with regard to the first point, yes, I think that many authors would probably have made very similar decisions. Yes, leaving out the commentaries, shortening things, leaving out contested issues. And so I think that in this regard, your main or a point that is probably more convincing is the focus of the author on chemical discussions. Yes, which suggests that the author had a particular interest in chemistry. That I think is a good point, but the other points I was not so sure about. But then with regard to the some other specific points that you make or inferences that you draw, for instance, that the author had to have very good English. Well, I think that that's already clear from the fact that he was or he or she. Yes, let's maybe keep this open. That the author was the fact that the author had the responsibility of sharing new documents by translating and summarizing them for a French-speaking audience, that I think is sufficient to suffice to infer that the author must have had very good English. But then, during your introduction, I must admit, I checked on Google Books Dictionnaire Royal from the time, which has an entry on fit. A fit of an egg is accès de fièvre. So I'm not familiar with the term egg, AGUE, but so fit and accès is in, a dictionary at the time. So you don't have to be a specialist to draw the link. Yes. So and this is just one sentence, but I guess you can find similar dictionaries or use of the term accès and so on. So I thought, well, I didn't really understand why this would be, a kind of additional point in favor of identifying the name of the author. And then one last point. You mentioned toward the end of your paper that Geoffrey's annotated copy of Newton's Opticks is in a library in Cornell, or the academic library of Cornell. And I was wondering whether you didn't go there, or because at least you do not mention that you went there to verify to read the annotations and compare them to other to compare the handwriting, but also compare the content to the content of the translated text.
Yes. Well, as I said, this is I think this is a very tricky manuscript to work with. Yes, you're completely right on the yes, the dictionaries, but again, this choice of word by Newton, fits, was for me and for other historians so unusual that I believe that the translator had to have some kind of I wouldn't say preparation, but some kind of knowledge of the intended use of this term. Again, that's why the title of the paper is The Quest of Authorship, because it is really a point that it is disputable. Yes. So I completely agree with you that a translator could also have read a dictionary, consulted a dictionary to translate, as Pierre Coste or Jean-Paul Marat could have done that. But again, I think that for the circumstances, I really believe that this shows that this translator had a good knowledge of English, which was not common at that time within the French community. And the last thing that you mentioned, I forgot.
The Cornell Library. Yes.
Yes. Yes, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't have the opportunity to go again. 2010. Yes. I really wanted to go, but 2020 everything closed. I had to go back to Brazil. I had to finish the project, and yes.
Okay.
I could go.
And so you also did not try to contact a librarian at Cornell University and ask for some copies, or?
No, because I don't think, I really don't know if this is really Geoffroy's copy, because I think that someone, the person that mentioned that is Henry Gerlach. So yeah, I didn't find at the time the necessity of going there and comparing the copy. Because again, I have the manuscript, and I think that the information that we have, or the analysis of the manuscript, gives us a good knowledge of how book 2 was translated, which was my main goal in this, one of my main goals in this paper. So I really wanted to understand how book 2 was translated, what omissions and abridgements we can see in this book or in this translation. But yes, this would be certainly next step that I really hope or either me or someone else can go to Cornell and see this copy, if it's really from Geoffroy's, if it has any annotations. And yes, I completely agree with you. I really do not disagree. And it certainly, the analysis of this copy could add many, many more details to this case, if we say so. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ovidio, please. Myself in the queue. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Breno, for the paper and for the presentation. I guess what I'm really asking for is a bit of a background. So I would have liked to know more. This is probably just my own ignorance, but how is this manuscript related to the initial reaction which the French Academy had against Newton's optics, right? Namely Mariotte. So I actually don't know what was Mariotte going up against in Newton's optics? Was it specifically the prism experiments, or was it the account of colors, or so on? And I'm really curious whether this kind of initial response to Newton got carried over, and what you identified in the manuscript is really a reaction for or against that initial response of Mariotte.
Okay, so Mariotte was already dead when
right.
this translation was presented, but Mariotte he was part of this early reception of Newton's optics in France. So we need to go back to 1672 or 1673 when Newton published the new theory on light and colors that was received in France, and Mariotte he attempted to repeat Newton's experiments, and he was not successful. And there was already like not very good reception of Newton's optics among other natural philosophers in France at that time. So yes. So why do I mention Mariotte in this context? Because I wanted to show, or to bring more evidence, that when Geoffroy presented his translation, Newton's optics was still not very well accepted among French natural philosophers. So that could explain the omissions, the abridgements that the translator did in the manuscript. So to be to be less controversial to the members of the Academy. So yes, because the basic episode on Newton's, on the reception of Newton in France, or the turning point, would be in 1715 when Desaguliers presented, like he repeated Newton's optical experiments to a bunch of French natural philosophers, and that turned it was a turning point, and etc. And then you have like Pierre Costa's translation, and then Newton's optics began to be more well received among French natural philosophers. Yes, this is the idea. Again, when Geoffroy presented his translation to the members of the Academy, because we know that he presented, because we know from the notes of the minutes of the Académie des Sciences, les procès-verbaux, Newton, or especially Newton's optics, was not yet well received among the French natural philosophers. Like you have Malebranche, you have Mariotte's books and papers that were very Cartesian or neo-Cartesian, and yeah. So that's why I put Mariotte's in.
Casper, please.
Yes. Hi, thank you for the paper and the presentation. I wanted to ask because, as you said, it has been some years since you wrote this paper. Mm-hmm. And then you already said it is quite difficult to pinpoint a certain line of influence from this first translation. But now I wonder, how would you say that your work on this manuscript changed your own view on the early 18th century French natural philosophers?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think that again, I really wanted to understand the reception of Book 2 in France. So what I could see is that the most controversial parts of Book 2, if this is Geoffroy's manuscript, those parts did not enter France at this moment, at this early French translation. So at this early presentation of Newton's optics in France. So that's what changed my that's what changed in my perception of the introduction of Newton's optics in France. Yes. So I think this is one of the most maybe the most important things that I could see while I was doing research on that, while I was writing this paper. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of points. I mean, sort of follow up. The first is a sort of follow up on Karin's comments, and the second is a separate question. So the first point I wanted to insist on is this. You mentioned that in the procès-verbaux of the Academy, the name of Geoffroy is mentioned and associated with a translation of. We can see you.
Yes, I'm with the cell phone, but I'm trying to.
So the name of Geoffroy is actually mentioned and associated with the translation of Newton's optics. So actually the question you're raising is whether the manuscript you found is actually the one that Geoffroy presented or read in front of the Academy. And I think that there are good paleographic reasons to believe so. I mean, from what you showed even in today's presentation, the writing is the same as the procès-verbaux or the acts of the Academy. So obviously not done by Geoffroy himself, but probably by a secretary or somebody who transcribed the meeting. So there might be. So I guess that even like looking at the Geoffroy's personal annotations on other texts would probably be useless because, I mean, that's a text made in another context. But so this fact that in the procès-verbaux his name is mentioned is perhaps relevant, and in your paper it appears to be kind of hidden or just mentioned en passant. So I was wondering why it is not given the appropriate relevance, because I mean that's the main piece of evidence leading to Geoffroy. And the second question concerns.
Sorry, could you
yeah, the question is,
just repeat?
I mean, the fact that in the procès-verbal, in the minutes of the Academy, the name of Geoffroy is associated with Newton's, the translation of Newton's optics, seems to me the best evidence you have to actually attribute the manuscript that you found to Geoffroy. And I mean, you didn't really discuss or bring up this evidence as something super relevant to the affair. Whereas I think that this might be, if not the final argument, a very good argument in favor of your thesis. So why do you consider this argument a minor one, if you do? And the second question concerns Geoffroy himself. So from the paper, we don't really learn much about this guy. And I myself do not really know a lot about him, so except that he was a chemist and so on. But one thing I know about Geoffroy is the famous table of affinities that he published a few years later, this translation, alleged translation of the Opticks. And I know this table from other people quoting Geoffroy as a sort of chemical revival of Newton's attraction. So that it takes a Newtonian attraction. Whereas, so this translation of the Opticks is a critical text. So it seems to be critical vis-a-vis Newton. So I was wondering if you consider that Geoffroy changed his mind on Newton, or whether you think that, I mean, how does this fit within your picture?
I don't know. I don't know if we can. I don't know if you can say that Geoffroy changed his mind on Newton. I guess that my point of view is that because again, Geoffroy was a young member of the Académie des Sciences, so he was not like a senior figure at the Académie des Sciences. And he was presenting, again, the new book of this very relevant person from England, Associé étranger, president of the Royal Society. So I think that, again, his optics was not yet well received in France. So I think that he avoided the controversial things at this moment. Maybe later, because he wrote some things on attraction, I think later, right? Maybe later he could have the opportunity to read more or investigate more or be more, you know, like more aware of Newton's ideas and so on. But again, I don't think that at this moment, at this very moment where he presented his translation, he had these ideas in mind. Because, for instance, you mentioned attraction. I mentioned in the paper that there was a proposition in book 2. There is a proposition in book 2, which is proposition 10, where Newton discussed this this kind of optical force. And well, if we believe that Geoffroy is the author of this manuscript, but the author of this manuscript completely ignored this part. So he does not mention anything related to forces, nothing that Newton discussed in this proposition. So I don't think that Geoffroy was at this moment this person that got involved in this ideas of attraction and yes. Again, I think that Geoffroy, a young member of the Académie des Sciences, had this gift that he got from Hans Sloan, and a person that he really liked. He translated. He was responsible for translating some of the papers from the Philosophical Transactions. We know that he had this responsibility, and that he got this manuscript. He condensed. He translated a very condensed version, a very condensed translation, and avoiding the controversial points, and yeah, and presenting, giving more emphasis to the chemical topics of this book. Yes. Again, the first question was.
Sorry, the first question was just about this mention in the minutes of the Academy that
Yes.
Monsieur Geoffroy presented a translation of the Opticks, and which seems to connect, well, which first connects Geoffroy with a version of the Opticks.
Mm-hmm.
And since you found, I mean, a manuscript that is prepared with the same criteria, graphic criteria, I mean, and then the Academy, the Academy's one in a library, which was, I mean, connected to the Academy and so on. Isn't this a piece of evidence, an important piece of evidence to substantiate your attribution of the manuscript to Geoffroy? Or
well,
so what do you think of that?
Okay, as someone who had read the manuscript, yes, of course, but being like more skeptical, basically no. Like again, we don't have any information on this manuscript, so we do not have any indication of authorship. We don't know when it was written. We can say that, okay, the handwriting seems it's very similar to those of similar manuscripts that were written at the time, and so on. Yes, we could say that, but again, taking the facts or the information that we have, we don't know where this manuscript came from where this manuscript came, and who wrote it. But what we do know is that Geoffroy presented a translation. If he presented this manuscript, is one possibility, is the possibility that I believe, but he could have also presented like with his notes. Like he could have made like because again, we don't know how was this presentation, because the minutes of the Academy, they do not give many details. I think I mentioned this in the paper. They mentioned they have like some laconic mentions, like, oh, Geoffroy presented, like you read it, Geoffroy presented his translation of Newton's Opticks, and so we do not have any idea of how of what in fact was presented. Like he could have read like some more summarized version, more than that in the manuscript. But again, this is one of the possibilities. I believe that because of the translations, the choice of words, I think that it was a person that really understood English, that had some connection with Newton, with his peers, with Hans Sloan, for instance, and because of the choice to translate the parts where you have chemical topics, this shows that it was a person that had some interest in these parts. Not only the fact that the manuscript itself, it's very, it was produced possibly to be read by someone else because of the handwriting. Yes. So again, these are speculations, but we are trying to connect the dots and see if we can get like a picture of it. As Karin mentioned, we can go to Cornell, we can see the his supposedly copy, his supposed copy of the optics there, compare things, see if that copy has some notes. We don't know. So yes, it's still a quest, like, of authorship.
Before Ovidio, we have some questions by Henny, who cannot talk, but I will read the questions for him, if he's okay with that. So question number 1 by Henny. Do you think that the choices of the translator reflect an uneasiness with Newton's theory and concept of fits? I ask this because I had a problem to understand the following sentence on page 102. And the sentence is the following. It is understandable then why Geoffroy might have eliminated recurring references to the connection between the causes of the color rings and the colors of bodies, the brief mention to a force in proposition 10 of part 3 of book 2, and ultimately the emphasis on the fits, perhaps thinking they would be too complex and would require a deeper initiation into Newtonian presumptions and reasoning, which wouldn't have been entirely accepted by the fellows of the Académie des Sciences. So, do you think that the translator was more sympathetic or more critical to Newton's theory of fits?
Well, again, what we have is the manuscript. So we can only say what we can read from the manuscript. So in the manuscript, I think that he thought that either Geoffroy, I would say Geoffroy because I believe Geoffroy is the author of the manuscript, but Geoffroy thought that this idea was really complex and kind of strange, maybe, and then that he chose to not emphasize or to de-emphasize the parts where Newton explored the connections with colors of bodies and colors in thin and thick films, and the importance of this theory, because you can see this is the only definition. It's written definition quite big, and the translator does not put that way. Like he translated as it was some part of proposition 12. So yes, I think that he had some criticism on this theory, as many other natural philosophers would have in the 18th century about this theory. If you see the history of this theory in the 18th century, you would see that neither the English or the British believed or accepted the theory of fits. If you see, for instance, Robert Smith, who had written a book on optics, a complete system of optics, was published in 1738 or 37, I think, or Henry Pemberton, also really an advocate for Newton. He has written a book called entitled "A View of Isaac Newton's Philosophy." They do not mention the Newton's theory of fits, or if they mention, like they mention a very brief way, very skeptical way. So when you look to France, you will see a similar movement. If you read, for instance, Voltaire's Isaac Newton's Elements of Natural Philosophy, he gives like a very unsympathetic view of Newton's fits. Like if you see, for instance, Francesco Algarotti's Newtonianesimo per le Dame in Italy, you would also see like not very good reception of Newton's fits. So yes, I believe that this is Geoffroy had really a criticism on this theory, and this shows that if this is Geoffroy's manuscript, that Newton's theory of fits was already not well received at the very beginning of the 18th century, even before Newton's optics entered, in fact, in France.
We have a question from Ovidio. So please.
Yeah, thanks. This is like a long shot, but I wonder if you could speculate about the intended audience of the manuscript, just judging from how it looks, right? Because I mean, you were mentioning this. It's probably a big manuscript, right? The writing is very nice. Probably there are no underlines, no like
there
ugly
are
stuff
some
like that.
corrections and some annotations, not much, but very few annotations and corrections.
I mean, it's probably it seems. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wouldn't it seem the kind of manuscript intended to be read by someone else, not necessarily just presented at some meeting of the academy? I mean, could you speculate a bit on this?
Yes, I mentioned in the paper about the Comité de Librairie. Again, everything regarding this manuscript is long shots. I really hope that somehow we can find something about this manuscript that could clarify a bit more, even if denies everything that I wrote or everything that Bernard Cohen wrote. But I really wanted to see more things about this manuscript. So I think that maybe Geoffroy prepared, or he or some of assistant, I don't know, prepared this manuscript to be presented to not presented, but to be delivered to the Académie des Sciences, maybe to be published, maybe. And then we have like the issues with publishing translations within the Academy. I mentioned in the paper that I think that in the long history of the Histoire et Mémoire of the Académie des Sciences, they published, I think it was only one translation. So it was not common to publish translations of books or papers or something else. So yes, the evidence, I think, indicates that this manuscript was prepared for something, whether it is to be published, printed, we don't know, but probably to be read by someone else. Who, we don't know. But yes, because of the structure I showed you, but the manuscript is very elegant. It has like all the curves and it has like a structure that we don't find in other manuscripts that really were notes that were produced at this very same moment. Yes, so just hand notes and corrections and so on. We do not find this in this manuscript. Again, we find some few corrections, very few corrections. If you want me, I can show you like the entire manuscript. But yes. Do you want me to show the entire, like to pass the entire manuscript? If you want, I can do that. But
no, I mean, absolutely. If that's
yeah, we can. But I just wanted to, before you reshare, if any of the PhD students have a question. I mean, Casper already said something, but if you want to ask another question, or Marie-Olivier, otherwise you can share your screen and
I can show you. Well, I hope that it does not compromise the So this is like, you see optic, so axiome, you see like propositions, proposition 1. This is book 1, I think. Yeah, so theorem. You see I don't think you see my yeah, but for instance this part here. So these is kind of the thing that shows me that this manuscript was really prepared for something else. Let me see if I can find something on corrections. But yeah, I think that in book 2 maybe. So this is book 2. This is the translation. Livre second, première partie, etc. So this, in here, fin du premier livre, end of the first book. You see, here you can see like some notes. I think it's on colors, orange or blue, violet, maybe. So yes. So this is like the manuscript. So it's a very well produced manuscript.
I mean, another question that I had, it's perhaps if not stupid, very basic, but I mean, since we haven't mentioned it so far, it's nice to have a confirmation of that. And I wonder whether in the complementary sources that exist within the academy, and I mean especially the Pochette de Sciences, and also the documentation of the Comité de Librairie, the one studied by McClellan. Is there any mention? Because when they were discussing, for instance, a paper or a translation or whatever, you rarely find the paper itself in the minutes of the academy, but sometimes you can find the documents that were discussed in this folders, the Pochette de Séance, where they put everything that was received or discussed. So I wonder, I mean, I guess you checked, but whether the documents, these other documents, play a role in the reconstruction. And also another thing that you mentioned, that why I thought about the Comité de Librairie, you rightly mentioned that in the Histoire et Mémoire you never have translations. I mean, it's not the right place to publish a translation. But another thing that might be useful to consider is that this Comité de Librairie also give approbation and advice on treatises or external publications. So if the person was a member of the academy, and the academy was to fund the publication, you had to go through this sort of peer review in order to publish. So in that case, even if the translation was not meant for the memoir, it could have been brought to the attention of the committee, because even to publish elsewhere, you needed to go through the committee.
Yes.
I don't know if.
So yes, I've checked at that occasion. The Comité de Librairie, I think, maybe I wrote that on paper too. I think that they have more information from the 1730s on. So they don't have many information before. I think that McClellan shows that they have like some more information on how they worked from the 1730s and not before. Because again, this is the very beginning of this new Académie des Sciences. It was reformed in 1699, as you may know, with all the and then the Histoire et Mémoire was established, and they began to publish it. And yes, we do not have any information on how the Comité de Librairie worked before. And okay, so the second question was the microphone.
Sorry, the other point, but I mean, it's really marginal. It's the pochette de séance. So whether in these envelopes there were any
No.
relevant related documents or relevant documents.
Yeah, no. Even if it was like meant to be published, not on the Histoire Mémoire, but somewhere else, and no, we do not have any. Yeah, we do not have it. And Cohen also did not find anything when, and I think that he did like a search much more, much deeper than I did at the time, but yeah.
Thank you. So we have another question. So please, Karin. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I have a question more related to the content of Newton's theory and his experiments, in particular the notion of a transduction. And we just had a conference on analogies in modern science and philosophy last week. So, and I have a particular interest in the use of analogies and the epistemic status of that use. So maybe I have two questions on transduction. So on page 93, you mention, so it's basically about a transferal of properties from a macroscopic event to in order to determine microscopic characteristics. Yes, you go from a macro level that is treated as known to a micro level that is treated as unknown. But so I was wondering what you mean by microscopic characteristics. Yes, because if these are characteristics that can be identified by the use of a microscope, then you do not need to engage in analogical transferals. But maybe you meant the term microscopical characteristics in a kind of loose sense, namely in relation to very, very small features or features of very, very small objects that we precisely cannot detect by observation.
Yes, that's exactly
Okay.
that's exactly the sense.
Okay.
The idea was okay. You will continue. Okay.
Yeah. So the term, I think, microscopic is used in a kind of loose sense here.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is from Shapiro's reasoning on the content of book 2. But yes, this is in a loose sense. Microscopic in the sense that it is not observable with our bare eyes.
Yes.
Like you cannot observe. Yeah. Sorry.
But neither can we observe. Could Newton observe it with a microscope at the time?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So so non-observable characteristics of the particles of bodies. Yes, and so you assume that what is true of the macro level also applies to the non-observable level about which you want to know more. Yeah.
Yes,
so I find that interesting.
That's not my assumption. This is from Shapiro's, but yes, yes, so I basically agree with him in this sense.
Yes. Okay. So so my real question was about concerns Newton's own or whether Newton in the context of this book of the Opticks also explains why he thinks that drawing these inferences is justified. Yes. Because it is a type of I don't know if he considered it a type of induction, but at least it's based on the assumption that there is homogeneity between the macro level and the micro level. And I was wondering whether he took this for granted or whether he tried to justify his use of this type of analogical inference.
I think that he took it for granted. And the thing is, so that's why I said that book 2 was in the middle of book 1 and 3 in an epistemological sense. because again, this is from Alan Shapiro's, and basically what when I read book 2, I think that Newton was really able to cover this hypothetical reasoning with somehow an empirical sense. So he's trying to say that he can argue on the non-observable features of the bodies from the observable features of the bodies. Yes. But he does not say that this, because in a sense, this is he cannot prove experimentally this, because he cannot see the size of the particles that compose the bodies. So he cannot see that one particle is denser than the surrounding ones. So this is an hypothetical reasoning, but he covers in his arguments that, and he gives like a glimpse or an idea that all these is based on experiments and observations and so on. But this is, in fact, this is as Alan Shapiro says, this is a method, this is an analogy that he constructs, but based on or not based on experimental evidence, if we can say that.
Okay, yeah. But so just to clarify, does Newton present it as if the inference has the same kind of epistemological value as an experiment based on observation?
Yes.
Or does he distinguish between the trustworthiness of the one case and the other?
No, I think he really believes that this is in the same level.
Okay.
Because when you read the propositions of part 3 of book 2, you see that he makes these connections, like the size of the particles of the bodies can be determined by I don't know exactly the words, but by the size of the or the thickness of the thin film and so on. So he really believes that in this connection in an experimental level.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe one last follow-up question. Yeah. So in that case, maybe Newton was not very different from Descartes. Yeah. So who also came up with very strange, hypotheses, and also drew a lot of inferences in order to clarify something about matter or the universe. And I think it's interesting, yes, as Shapiro has done apparently, to identify these points where Newton is also, in a way, employing implicit hypotheses or assuming analogies, just as others had done. And evidently, Newton was very critical of what Descartes and others had done. So I think that's interesting. Yes, I think Marie, you also like this. Yes, I don't know if you want to say something to this.
No, yes, and okay, Marie, I'm sorry.
No, I do not have anything particular to say, but I do follow the reasoning, and I agree with what you say, Karine. So I'm also interested in the answer.
Yeah, well, yes, and I think that the transduction comes from Descartes. I think that if I remember from Shapiro had he wrote a book called Fits, Passions, and Paroxysms that is only about book 2. So it's the very detailed analysis. This is a book from 1995 or 93, I think. This has some years, 30 years. And yes, that's why I like book 2, because book 2 is very unique in this sense, because when we get to know Newtonian optics, basically what the things that we know the most are the experiments with prisms. and all of the reasoning and the spectrum and so on. But we do not know this part or the questions. But we do not know much about this part of the optics where he was really complex in the sense of building reasonings that were built in a hypothetical ground, but that he manages to give it like a sense that it was based or built in an experimental ground or empirical ground. Yes, but thank you very much for the question.
Thank you.
I have a sort of follow-up question concerning transduction. So I also,
Yes.
when I read this word in the paper, I was kind of puzzled, or because I'm not accustomed to intend transduction in this sense. And so I was wondering if you could like say more on this choice and whether the other conventional senses of transduction are, according to you, also legitimate, or whether they do also apply to what Newton does. I think of, well, in the history of technology, you usually, I mean, as far as I know, use transduction to mean the inference from a specific case to another specific case. In Simondon, you have a question of commensurability and incommensurability. So you make commensurable two fields or theories which in principle are not commensurable. And then in psychology, Piaget said that this childish mechanism according to which you want to instantiate a law based on absurd data. It cannot be the afternoon because I didn't take my nap yet. I mean, as long as you associate an afternoon with taking a nap. So what a so, and in none of these senses I could really situate in a way an experimental procedure. So I had doubts about this word, or I was asking questions about this.
Yes. Again, this is a proposition from Alan Shapiro, and so yeah, the basic idea is that one that I wrote in the paper, is that you kind of infer some quality of things that you cannot observe from things that you can observe. So why Shapiro chose this term? Well, I don't know exactly, but yeah, he kinds of gives some connections to how this word is used or understood in other senses. But basically, the idea that Alan Shapiro constructs in his analysis of Newton's, of book 2 of Newton's Optics is this one. Like Newton is making inferences on non-observable properties, non-observable features of the bodies from what he's observing in like a macroscopical level. So yeah.
Is there any other question or remark? We can also, I mean, thank again BRENO for the presentation and the nice discussion. Thank you very much for joining us today and discussing with us. And just a note about the next session. We will discuss a paper by Tamas Demeter in November, if I'm not wrong, on the 26th of November, but I will circulate an email to remind about the session and send the paper. Meanwhile, I say goodbye to you all, and I'll see you soon. And thank you again, BRENO.
Thank you very much for all the questions, all the comments, and I really hope that this discussion sparks some new interest in this amazing manuscript that it's in Paris, and certainly, I guess the Newtonian scholars would be very interested in working with this amazing, incredible manuscript. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. Goodbye.